All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to Hour 2 of tonight's show. My name is Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. My guest this hour is Beth Darlington-Bailey, and Beth is on the other side of the ocean. She is in Kent, England, where it's 3:45 in the morning. God bless you for doing this. And, yeah. You know, with almost 15 years of active paranormal investigation experience, Beth stands as a wealth of knowledge and pivotal contributor for the field of interest. Her journey commenced in the United Kingdom before she made her way back to Australia, where she became a part of a paranormal investigation team. Fueled by her unique vision to elevate the skills of the paranormal investigator, and the Axis Paranormal was then created. Joining me now from Kent, England, is our guest this hour, Beth Darlington-Bailey. And Beth, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for mentioning the morning part.
How did you get involved in all of this? What was it that happened in your life that something said, Beth, this is what we have to do. This is what we must do. What was that point in your life?
Oh, goodness. Well, back in the time when I was living in Australia, my father had owned a beautiful old building, and it was about, in Australia, having a building, and it's very similar to places like in America and Canada, where if it's a building's, 140 years old, it's quite old.
Yes.
Beautiful old building, and he bought it, and he was renovating it to be a bed and breakfast, sort of like a hotel type thing going on. And I walked in thinking, oh, there has to be a ghost in here somewhere. And that has always been there. And it's interesting because I came from two very skeptical parents. So for me to be so interested in the fact there could be something after we pass away was very unique. So I would walk these walls thinking, oh, there has to be something here. And anyway, so I went to sleep one night, and I heard it sounded like a picture sliding off the wall and hitting the ground. And I remember thinking, that's a bit strange. So in the morning, I sort of spoke to my dad, and I said, I've heard this picture. Have we got any pictures that are hanging up on the wall? And he said, no, remember, we've just done the painting of the entire building. There's absolutely nothing about what would make that sound. Now, looking back now, there could be possible explanations for it, but at that time, I think I was wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, thinking, could that have been something that was uniquely paranormal? I don't know. Nowadays, I would have gone and had a look and investigated more. But I think, to be honest, the interest to be involved, and also the openness of the possibility of the paranormal is always there. It's the idea of can things move on their own? Can people understand information from each other where you wouldn't have actually had that conversation beforehand to understand that? Like, it intrigued me so much. And even just from the age of 12 right upwards, it's always been there. And I think it's only been in probably the last 15 years I really started to pursue that interest a lot more seriously.
And what kind of paranormal investigations have you done, Beth?
Oh my goodness. So probably it depends. It's so from the public sort of I guess you say the public big locations, like things like Waverly Hills Sanatorium or the Queen Mary or anything like that. I think I'm probably done about 30 of those. I think for personal ones, I think it's probably about 13 roughly. And a lot of people may think that may not be much, but with residential and private cases, they take a lot more time than you do when you go up to your average ghost hunt type thing. But as far as actual locations, it's probably, I say between 30 and 50, I would say.
Beth, what is your definition of a ghost?
Ooh, the best question in the world, isn't it? I remember speaking to a person and I asked the very same question, and they had one word, and I thought was quite fitting. And they said leftovers. I thought, you know what, that's actually not that inaccurate if you want to look at life in that way. So I think it's leftovers, but of what we don't know. It could be of what's happened to us, leftovers of energy that happens to us when we've passed over. Is it leftovers of people's minds of that person who's passed away? It could really go all different avenues, but I've actually kind of taken that word on board and sort of made that my sort of staple answer, I guess you could say.
What do you think the middle ground paranormal investigator is?
Oh, there's a lot of people that love getting involved in investigating, and understandably so. So, you see programs on TV, you read about it, there's a lot of social media about it, and you think, I'd love to get involved, and they go and attend events, which is fantastic. So I could say that's the entry level. Then, of course, as you mentioned, the middle ground, the intermediate investigator, are those individuals who are like, I feel that it would be beneficial to learn a little bit more than that. So I want to understand the whys, the hows, the whens, the patterns. I'm going to look at things a little bit more, write notes down, document things, find answers, and put information together to see whether or not this is the same experience as someone else has had, or research from, sort of 50 years, maybe 100 years ago from someone else. Is there any research papers that can sort of correlate the experience that I've had? And I think that middle ground investigator is starting to grow. That audience is starting to grow a lot more since I started, at least. And of course, there's I guess you could say that, not say the top level investigator, but there's the ones that are really into the academic side of it. It's the psychology side of it, the side of it, the academic side. But the middle, there's definitely a growing of a middle ground investigator where it kind of bridges between the academic and those who just attend sort of public sort of events.
Why do you think paranormal investigations are so popular these days?
I can totally understand why. I attend them still. I'm not just someone who does private and residential cases. I think they're really important. I think they're very popular. I think mainstream media is a big reason for that, particularly on shows. But I think a lot more shows are now actually on YouTube more now than actually on network TV's programs. But I think it's just people being curious. People have experiences regardless. And these shows and these programs that people are creating help others to understand that they're actually not the only people that have had those kinds of experiences. Of course, not every location is going to be like, sort of the Enfield poltergeist where things are flying off and objects are moving around on their own constantly. But it's definitely a lot more. I think a lot more people enjoy it, definitely, a lot more.
But should these shows on YouTube and other video platforms be given as much credibility as they are? Because today with EI, green screen, CGI, anything can be created that's not real.
Absolutely. And that's the hardest part, because I think although the interest is there for people wanting to watch programs like that, the networks are now, that's actually starting to decline. A lot of shows at the point of this interview is not investing as much as they used to do, not
That's
even
right.
5 years ago. So a lot of people are starting to revert to making their own shows and having total production creativity, I guess if you could call it that, on YouTube. But you're right, it's having that legitimacy with what happens. It is difficult. You think sometimes if you see something on TV, it's got a bit more street cred as opposed to watching a YouTube video of somebody walking around a building going, oh my gosh, I think I've just experienced something. But then we have to take that into consideration for that the credibility of that individual, creating that video content on YouTube. So it is a difficult game. You do make a very good point there, but I think we just got to take them as they are. But then again, it's their own reputation, I guess, on the line for when they do create this content.
Well, from what I've seen on YouTube, there's a lot of garbage there, and there are very, 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 very few videos that I've watched that I would even give a second look to, because there's a lot of yelling at the spirits. There's demonologies. There's exorcism. There's a lot of stuff that never really happens. But if you're just getting interested into this field, what you see is what you believe. And if you're doing that, watching a video, and you're believing what you see, isn't that like misinformation when it's not true? Yeah.
Absolutely. You make a really good point. I mean, as you mentioned, lots of screaming and running about is definitely not how it works. Even if you do attend a public sort of event where you're in a beautiful location, that's definitely not. You're lucky if you have even the smallest little bit of any type of potential paranormal activity at all. So it is definitely exaggerated to goodness knows. It does make me chuckle, I must admit, when the D word, as I call it, the demonology and sort of demonic entities. I believe it's a demon, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, which one? And then people go quiet. And not realizing there's 72 different types of demons if you want to actually classify it. So how do you know which one it is? What name is it? Why is it there? It's interesting, but as you said, like demon cell. I mean, but now it's. I think it was haunted objects a couple of years ago. There tends to be fads, you'll notice, when it comes to certain YouTube videos. But you are right. There are some that are somewhat questionable. But there are others that are starting to. I think Katrina Weidman has got one with Jack Osborne, which is actually quite, sort of more level-headed, if you want to look at that. So there are some people that have had shows that don't have shows anymore. They're actually now creating their YouTube content, and they've got a little bit more street cred, if you wish to use it or look at it that way. But there is definitely some questionable stuff out there.
Yeah, more often than not. You and I have to take our first break, so please stand by. Exonation, our guest this hour is Beth Darlington-Bailey, and she got up very early in the morning where she lives in Kent, England, just to be here with us today, and thank you so much for doing that, Beth. For more information about Beth, visit her website, accessparanormal.com. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell, and we'll be back on the other side of this short break as the X-Zone continues from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca. If you'd like to send me an email, my email address is very simple, xzone@classic1220.ca.
All around old Cape Horn, ships of the line, ships of the morn. Some who wish they'd never been born, they are the ghosts of Cape Horn.
Welcome back, everyone. Beth Darlington-Bailey is our special guest. Her website is accessparanormal.com. Beth, how much does the intent of somebody who is going to go on a ghost walk or a ghost tour, the intent that they believe that they're going to see something, the belief that they're going to feel something, hear something, how much does this play into what they believe they are seeing on the tour compared to what they're actually seeing and hearing?
Oh, great question. I think for me personally, it plays a huge part. I think if you walk into a what is an alleged haunted location, you've paid for a ticket. It's got a reputation that already sets the bar for the experience that you may potentially have. So particularly if you're with other people that also want to have that experience as well. So I think going into places like that and having that bias, I guess you could say, is something. It's very different if you're dealing with that in a location like that as opposed to dealing with a private or residential case. So public cases, you're going to want to walk in and have that experience, and people want to experience something. And I have been that person and still occasionally am. I still attend public events because I think it's kind of, it takes the pressure off of dealing with private and residential cases, and you go in there and you're like, I want to have that experience. Of course, that definitely either heightens or you've got to be very level-headed as well. So obviously I don't go in there and sort of, like you said, with the screaming and all that sort of stuff that goes on with the YouTube videos. You're well and truly past that gate. But it is something that a lot of people would love to be able to see whether or not they can experience something paranormal because they are intrigued by it as well. So I think that the wanting to experience something is something we shouldn't shy away from. But when stuff happens, that's when we should be a little bit more level-headed about it.
What about all these different locations where tours go in day after day after day, sometimes 2 tours per night? And, here in America, we have the Waverly, and people just wait to go and do those investigations. And why do the spirits put up with it? It's like their homes are being invaded. They're getting yelled at. It seems that at times there's a lot of disrespect when it comes to the investigating of haunted locations.
There so can be. I mean, you can't pick and choose people who are from the public that buy tickets to these locations and then come along. And then also at the same time, it's the people that run these investigations. How are they running it? What methods are they using? There are teams that are very much about no provocation at all, and there are some teams that are like, yes, let's go for it. For me, I think it's a time and place thing. I think if the people that run the location who are okay if you do provoke a little bit, then that might be all right. But it has to be something where it's, say for it's a jail. I wouldn't do provocation in any way for a sort of a mental asylum or a home or sort of a house. Not to say like a private residential case, but more necessarily a place that has opened up to the public. So I think it's definitely like a location-based decision, and also a decision that's okay with the owners. But yeah, I think the spirits in these places, there is a theory though where a lot of times that I've investigated Waverly Hills Sanatorium on my own with 2 other people. So we spent about a year putting money together to actually have the exclusivity to have that particular time, and it was definitely worth it. Even if absolutely very little happened, it was just like meeting a celebrity, I guess you could say. It's having that experience. But I do think that there are times where locations can be kind of almost overused. So I know that some people say, there's this massively haunted location, very well known. I've gone to it and nothing happened. And I've gone a couple of times and nothing happens. And as you say, is it to the point where spirits or energy might turn around and say, you know what, I'm kind of tired. I just want a break.
Exactly.
It gets overused. So, 10 years, 15 years ago, it might be, quite an interesting and intriguing place. There might be a couple of things happening here and there that are, that could potentially be paranormal. But then after a while, it's just like, I'm kind of done. I just want a break,
I sure
That's
do.
my experience.
In the United Kingdom, is there a industry within the paranormal tourism as there is in the United States and Canada? Like this industry is just blossoming.
Oh no, it's hugely huge over here. It's part of the reason why I even moved from Australia is that it's so much bigger over here. I for a while there, for about 8 years in a row, I would traveled to America and realized how much bigger it is in America. And obviously, I can imagine also in Canada as well. In Australia is definitely, there's definitely a community, there's definitely interest, but it's about population. And in Australia, you don't have the amount of people to have the amount of opportunities. And also the number of locations. Australia is a big piece of land, and if you want to go to an investigation, you're often driving hours and hours over a weekend to get to that reportedly haunted location and spend time doing that, and obviously driving back. Here in the UK, it is huge. It's I don't see it slowing down. I see it changing. It's definitely changing a little bit, but it's definitely huge. I mean, the written history. It's 2,000 years of written history, and you're walking through it, and there's Tudor houses and manor houses and all sorts of stuff, and museums, and I never ever not take it for granted at all, because having grown up in a country where you're lucky if anything's around the 200-year-old mark, you're here walking through a building that was built in the 14th century, and I live in a town where there's a castle that was the foundations are built from 1066. I will never ever take that for granted. It's just beautiful history, but then it's potential spiritual history in there as well.
What about places like the Tower of London? Have you been there, and what did you find if you went there doing an investigation? I would imagine it's pretty haunted.
Oh, I would love to do an investigation. I would literally, tell work I'm going on holiday, and I would just go and camp there for a week. It would be, that's my sort of pivotal place to be able to investigate. I think on the quiet, there probably has been not an official paranormal investigation done there, because it's owned by the king, it's owned by the crown, so pretty much nobody can get into it on an official basis. But the one thing I found was quite interesting is that there is there's something called the ceremony of the keys, and I've been to Tower of London about 4 or 5 times now as a tourist. And the ceremony of the keys is a ceremony that's done at night time. So they hand the keys back officially, and they do it every time. I think the only time they didn't do it was during the war and during COVID, but they've been doing it for 500 odd years, since King Henry VIII's time. And I actually was able to have a chat with the yeomen, who are the guys that actually live there and look after the place and run it and do the tours. And I said, do you guys get anything happening, kind of from a ghosty perspective? And they all opened up, and one of them said, yeah, we there's one apartment that if you're living there and you see the ghost of the little girl, that means it's your time to move out. So they have lots of ghost stories, lots of stuff happening there. But from an official perspective, you're very lucky if you even remotely could get in and investigate. But I think from an unofficial perspective, if I was one of them and I was living there and you've got the place to yourself and there's no visitors at say 6 o'clock at night and it's dark, what else are you going to do?
True. Tell me, do you think there's a stigma around paranormal investigating?
Yes, definitely. I have over the years had some very interesting conversations with people when they ask, oh, so what did you do on the weekend? I'm like, oh, I just hung out with friends. Oh, yeah, where did you go to? Just somewhere, just a homestead, which is like a beautiful country home in sort of the country of Australia. So, yeah, I was at a homestead. Oh, really? Which one? It was Monte Cristo. Oh, okay. Isn't that haunted? Yeah, it's meant to be. Oh, okay. Oh, I don't believe in that stuff. Or that. Are you into that? And if you say that you are, then you do you see spirits? And instantly think that just because you're an investigator, that suddenly you're a believer 100% of the time. And also at the same time, you're a medium as well. They seem to think that you can communicate with spirits. So there is a lot of stigma, I think, with investigating, particularly in Australia, not so much here. But I've definitely had those strange conversations with people where they're kind of very, it's all judgmental, I guess you could say, with it. I think it is slowly changing. I think gradually, particularly around Halloween, I think it's the easiest time of the year to actually talk about it. People love a good ghost story, but a lot of times I find people go, oh, that's good. That's good. I don't believe in any of that stuff. Or you get the flip side of, I don't believe in it, but there was this one time. And then it goes into a story like,
Where has been your most haunting experience?
Oh, goodness. There was a situation probably about a year and a half ago here in the UK where I was investigating a priory up north, sort of northish of London, and beautiful, beautiful building. And they've made it into a function centre as well. So they shut it all off and they close it all off, and then you get to wander, and it's incredible, incredible history. And I was sitting in one of the rooms that is considered the accommodation that people can have when they have these functions. And across the hallway was another room. And I sat in there, and I was, again, it's one of those things, I wasn't really expecting anything at all. You sit there and think, okay, let's see if there is anything around. I was with a group of people, but it was just me and this one other person, which is very rare. It's nice to investigate when you've only just got one other person or few people. I find that things tend to occur more if there's fewer people. Mm-hmm. And so we're sitting in this room, and I thought, you know what, it's a priory. Let's play some Gregorian music. It's Gregorian chant music. I don't mind a little bit of that every now and then. Let's play that and see.
All right.
What happens.
You and I are going to have to do a little bit of a cliffhanger. I'm sorry, because we came up across.
No worries, not for that.
We came across a hard break, so please stand by. Exo Nation, our guest this hour is Beth Darlington-Bailey, and she's joining us this morning from just south of London in Kent. And my goodness, it is early over there. When we come back, more of this fascinating topic from the other side of the ocean. Her website, www.accessparanormal.com. This is the X-Zone. I'm Rob McConnell, coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada, on your hometown radio, Classic 1220, and streamed around the world on classic1220.ca.
All around old Cape Horn, ships of the line, ships of the morn. Some who wish they'd never been born, they are the ghosts of Cape Horn. All around a riddle rum with a rim dim diddy and a
Clap for the Wolfman. He gon' reach your record high. Clap for the Wolfman. You gon' dig in till the day.
And welcome back, everyone. Beth Darlington-Bailey is our special guest. Her website is accessparanormal.com. We were talking about your most haunted experience, and I'm sorry that I had to cut you off, but let's continue.
That's completely fine. So we're playing this Gregorian music. Some
Right.
people call it like a sort of a trigger situation to see whether or not that encourages anything to occur. And we're sitting there, and to me, it felt like the atmosphere changed. But I didn't say anything at the time to the guy that I was with. And he looked at me and he's like, feels like the situation is changing. I'm like, yes. So that was a nice correlation of how I felt at the time. And I was looking towards the doorway, and then suddenly it violently shook, and it looked like somebody was trying to get in, but shaking the door so violently, like it was almost going to come off the hinges. And at that time, I also could see underneath that there was no shadows of foot or any feet or a person there at all. Mm-hmm. And I looked at the guy that was in the room at the time, and I said, what was that? And he said, oh, it might be the other people coming in. I said, firstly, they've got some serious strength. And secondly, we know how to treat a location if we're investigating. That is quite a violent way to try and get into a room. Like, no one does that. You just go, hi, you there? It just didn't make sense. This happened all within a few seconds. Then I could hear voices on the other side of the door. And then, like sort of knocking and tapping to say, hi, guys, are you in there? So obviously someone else has heard it. And so we opened the door, and they said, why did you try and get into our room? I'm like, well, we thought you were trying to get into our room. They said, no, the door shook violently. And what we realized is that both doors had shook at the same time, quite violently. And We spent half an hour trying to debunk the situation. We were trying to move the door the same way. We looked at vacuums of air. We looked at windows, all sorts of ways in which we could explain it. We could not explain the veracity of it. We couldn't even recreate it. It was so strong and so intense that I cannot explain it. And like, I think with many people, if they've experienced something that is unexplained, it stays with you, it changes you. It's the only way I can say it, because you may potentially experience something that is something that science can't explain yet. Is it an afterlife? We don't know, but something is definitely happening that other people all around the world experience. And and again, some people think, what, it's a shaking door, that's all it is. But to me, it was an incredible experience because it had such ferocity to it, and such intense and energy, whatever it was, and happened at the same time as someone else's door. So, it's we had someone stand behind the door, and there was the shadow of the feet. So yeah, it was an incredible experience, and I don't think I'll ever experience it again. We went back to that location a year later, and it felt interesting in that room, but that exact same experience, of course, it's spontaneous phenomena, so it will only happen when it happens.
That's interesting. But in your opinion, why is it that some people in the same room with other people who have an experience hear something or see something, and yet people standing right beside them, nothing? How do we explain that?
I think some people are more open than others. I think some people tend to sense more than others. I always make a bit of a joke saying I'm about as psychic as the chair that I sit on. Like that's about as, I don't have any ability at all. I think we all have gut feelings,
yes,
and we all have. I think that's an element of it. But some people's gut feelings are stronger than others, and it kind of correlates to being able to see and hear even. So I think some people tend to be a bit more of an open book than others from a sort of a psychic or spiritual perspective. Here in the UK, they call them sensitives. So if you're more of a sensitive person, you're going to be able to pick up more around the environment, potentially from a spirit perspective, if that is the case, as opposed to somebody like me who walks in, sits down and goes, oh, I'm fine, And that, I guess you could say that's why the door, sort of rattling as violently as it has been such a big thing for me to experience, because I'm not a psychic, I'm not a medium. I very rarely experience anything. I'm not somebody I would consider as a sensitive person. So when things like that happen, I think, oh, wow, that's really cool. I'd love to be able to experience that all the time. But there are other people that experience it more often because I think that's the way they're built.
What do the members of your family think about your profession as a paranormal investigator?
That's been an interesting journey. My father, when he found out that this is something I wanted to take seriously, he was embarrassed. He thought that I was somebody that potentially would just be, chasing shadows in the dark and believing everything that I experience, which is fine because, again, as we mentioned earlier, there are shows out there that give the impression that those who are involved do that, so he's obviously thought, oh no, as he said, oh Bethy, please don't tell me you're involved in this. And I'm like, Dad, it's fine. And then I explained what angle I take on it. Now he's my biggest fan. Loves what I do, loves the fact that it's a lot more logical, it's common sense, it's looking at investigative methods, it's understanding the world around us as much as we can, it's looking at alternative explanations. So again, he's often when we have our video catch-ups, he's often asking, well, what's the latest thing? How's it all going? Have you been on any investigations? So he's very, very supportive.
Oh, that is so good.
It makes a huge difference. It really does. But again, as you said, there is a stigma out there that if you're involved in this, you're going to be running around screaming with a K2 meter, and it's not the case at all.
I think that is because of the TV shows who like to embellish what they're trying to do. And after all, they've got to take all this footage and edit it down to make it look fast and interesting, because in the broadcast industry business, as you well know, it's about ratings.
Oh
And if
yeah,
you don't,
absolutely.
if
It's
you,
no one wants to see the reality
yeah,
of what an investigator does because that would be boring. You're sitting there, you're lucky if you experience anything. Most of the time you don't. Even with public locations
yeah.
that you go into that you paid a ticket for, some people go in there and go, I didn't experience anything. It's like, but that's the reality of it. But because of these shows making it look like there's something happening every 10 minutes, it gives that false impression that everywhere is going to be like that. So a lot of people go, oh, I'm never going back to this place because it was nothing. It's like, well, if you're really looking at proper, like literally proper paranormal investigating, you've got to go to that location multiple times over a long period of time to see whether there's patterns, to see if anything changes, see what's happening in the environment and if anyone's experiencing anything. So I know, I hear you.
I think the same thing is happening in the paranormal industry when it comes to the media, like what happened in law enforcement. People think, because of shows like Starsky and Hutch and let me see, Hawaii Five-0, that all this great investigative work with the catching of the bad guy, wow, that is done in an hour.
Yeah.
But it's
Yes,
not like that.
yes.
I remember sitting in a car for many hours, many days with nothing happening, waiting for the perpetrator to show their face so that they could get arrested. So, there's a lot more to it. Why do you think the spirits stay around? Because if the spirit is energy, why don't they just go somewhere else? Why would they stay and haunt a location or remain in a location when they do have the ability? Because, according to Einstein, they're just energy. Why stay?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, great point. There are a lot of people that believe in the paranormal community that people have unfinished business. It's a very, very long-held belief for goodness, hundreds of years. If you have unfinished business, if there's something that wasn't quite right at the time that you passed, then you've got to hang around to be able to fix that issue. But I think it kind of goes a bit more than that. I think there's a lot more choice if there is an afterlife, whether or not somebody wishes to come and go. It's like the old comment that a lot of people say is like, why can't we see ghostly dinosaurs? Like what dinosaurs didn't want to come back and say hello? So it's like, why is it that we not see that? And yet we see, the occasional ghost of the white lady. There's always a white lady in any palace or castle in this country. So the ghost of a white lady. But why isn't it somebody that is who's a ghost of somebody who's got a hoodie and tracksuit pants? Like, why isn't it sort of a modern style ghost in a particular location? So why is it some that show themselves and some do not? Is it because we're predisposed to thinking that if it's a ghost story, it has to be historical, so we're only going to see that? So maybe it's what we actually want to see that's changing what spirits that actually get seen. So it may not necessarily be what spirits are left behind. It's maybe we're kind of like, like we talked a bit before,
Sure.
bias, like you walk in and you're wanting to see something haunted, but it's an old building, so you're only going to want to see old spirits, essentially.
In your opinion, do ghosts actually get violent with people, or is this just another ploy to get ratings when you hear about people getting scratched, pushed, physically abused by a ghost?
It's interesting. I had a conversation a couple of days ago where, because I'm part of a society called the SPR here in the UK, called the Society of Psychical Research, and that topic came up in one of our meetings. Can a poltergeist physically hurt an individual? Because that would be quite traumatic. Again, it's difficult to say. I mean, I've personally myself felt that something has moved across my face, but it's not from a horribly violent perspective. And like you say, is it about ratings? Like you see people, on TV get pushed or shoved or dragged to the ground or choking. And that's another one I've seen on a show here in the UK, that someone goes, I can't breathe. And you're thinking, I don't know. But then again, you're not there at the time. You can't tell somebody they're not having that experience because it's a personal experience. So can a spirit really hurt you? I personally don't believe that. Because that would take, again, a lot of energy if there is such a thing.
Yeah.
But then again, people have had their experiences, and I can't say that is invalid, essentially.
You and I have to take our final break, Beth. Great having you with us, and thank you so much for getting up early. This just floors me. My
Oh,
gosh.
it's worth it. It's worth it.
Thank you so much. Exonation, our guest this hour is Beth Darlington-Bailey, who lives south of London in Kent. Her website, accessparanormal.com. And Beth and I will be back on the other side of the short break as we wrap up this hour and tonight's edition of the X Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell, from our broadcast center and studios in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. Send me an email, xzone@, that's the other. There's two email addresses that you know by now. xzone@classic1220.ca and xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. We'll both be back on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
Clap for the wolf man, you don't dig in till the day you die. To run, and
I am woman, hear me roar, in numbers too big to ignore, and I know too much to go back and pretend, 'cause I've heard it all before, and I've been down there on the floor, no one's ever gonna...
And welcome back, everyone. My guest this hour, final hour of tonight's show, is Beth Darlington-Bailey. Her website is accessparanormal.com. Before we get into some other topics, I'd just like to finish on the ghosts. What kind of equipment do you use when you go out to do an investigation?
Oh, it will be a horribly disappointing answer, but it's often just a notepad and a voice recorder. But I find that it's recording information and about what happens when something occurs to myself or to somebody else. If I've got a video recorder as well, that's also great as well, but it's more to document any possible activity that happens around people at the time. I've moved away a lot over recent years from those that detect, EMF or static or anything like that, because again, it's so, I understand why they've been made. If I use an EMF detector, it's more than likely to be able to detect whether or not EMF levels are quite high, because sometimes high levels of EMF may affect other people, which makes them think that they feel quite nervous, they feel like they're being watched. Some people have electrosensitivity issues, which means they feel it a lot more than others. So from using it from that perspective, yeah, but I wouldn't really be looking at it to detect a potential entity or spirit as such. But yeah, I tend to really strip it down and keep it simple. It's like documenting and understanding what's happening in the environment or a room at the time, as opposed to trying to find a spirit. So that's usually my toolkit, quite stripped down.
In the United Kingdom or in Australia, has anybody tried to do a correlation as to if there is an increase in paranormal activity with the increase of cell phone towers in areas?
That is interesting. I believe there has been some studies done regarding that. I know that from my own experience, that has made an impact with private cases. We tend to make note of that, because that can actually be a contributing factor for someone experiencing possible paranormal activity. And that more than likely leans to the fact that, again, it could be due to different levels of radioactivity,
Right.
in the sense of radio, high MF or that kind of thing, not necessarily being spirit orientated. Some people may just be more sensitive to it, but there definitely has been studies of that. Absolutely. Even power stations, if people live near a power station as well, we tend to make a decent note of that as well if we're dealing with cases, because it can impact somebody's experiences.
During investigations, do you ever record EVPs?
I attempt to, and I say that because I only think I've ever recorded potentially one that was actually in, and these people who do know their European history will know, is Elizabeth Bathory's castle. I was actually able to investigate, which was it's extremely rare experience. It's ruins of a castle from, gosh, I think it's probably the 12th century in the Czech Republic in the UK, and sorry, or Slovakia, I think it possibly is actually. And Elizabeth Bathory was a woman that was quite notorious in her time. She was very wealthy, which was rare at that time, and she was known to bathe in the blood of virgins. So this is the legend. So she lived to, she was jailed and into her own tower at some point in the later years of her life. And so I was able to investigate that location and certain parts of it. And I think I got a voice, but yeah, I'm very, as I said, I've made a joke over the years where I need to be quiet long enough in order for a spirit to get enough to be able to speak. So it's like I need to shut up, Beth, because they need to have a word. So if you shut up long enough, they might actually speak.
Do you think that there is, in that fact, an afterlife?
I think we shouldn't look away from the fact there's potentially an afterlife. Whether there is one, I don't know. But I don't think that we should ignore the fact that we should continue to explore, well, what if there is one? Mm-hmm. And a lot of people over the years have said, oh, that's just a sort of a wishy-washy answer. But it's true. Like science hasn't been able to prove it, and we need to respect that. But people have had experiences that could lean towards that. So if we continue to explore that, I think that's more important than whether or not there is one or not, because we need to find our answers. And if it's not an afterlife, then what is actually happening is something else that we haven't discovered yet.
You know, the way I look at it, Mother Nature has been telling us from the beginning of recorded history that we have 4 seasons. I know we do here in Canada. We have winter, spring, fall, and summer. I look at it that everything starts to live and flourish in the spring, birth. Then in the summer are the years of our best years, 30 to 50. And then come the fall are the golden years. And, I'm 71 and I'm trying to figure out why they call them the golden years. And then in the winter, we die. The trees are bare, the grass is brown. But what happens? Here we go, spring, life. And the fall and this, the seasons, I think, are a guideline from Mother Nature to say, hey, you morons, I'm telling you, life doesn't stop. It goes on. Whether it goes on in the same physical plane that we understand, it goes on. And I think that this is part of the ghost experience. Take it one step further. Where do you think reincarnation comes into play?
Oh, I love that. Obviously, there's a lot of people within the paranormal community that are big believers in reincarnation, and in the sense of, as you mentioned, so, it gives me sort of credence to my answer of leftovers.
Yes, exactly. Exactly, yeah.
It's kind of like, how can you be a ghost as well as reincarnate also into a particular person? Is energy a one thing, or is it so vastly different where you could be in multiple places at multiple times? Am I a spirit in Scotland walking through a castle as a soldier or something from back in the day, when they were fighting off the English, like, as well as me being here, as well as me being somewhere in India? Who knows? Is the energy everywhere, or is it just sort of localized? So as you say, it's with reincarnation, and you put that into play, it's like, are we still learning while we're still ghosts and while we're still here? It's a big question.
Do you think more scientists, now that quantum physics and string theory and everything else is being looked at as possible answers to everything, that more members of the scientific community will actually start paying more attention to the paranormal and trying to see exactly what the paranormal is and how it fits into our reality based on quantum physics?
I would love that. I would, if I was to die tomorrow, knowing that that was something that was being more seriously looked at, I would die a happy woman. It would be great. It's a work in progress. I think it's very, very gradually leaning towards that, but you've got to have the right people talking to the academics and the scientists in the sense of let's not laugh about this. Let's look at this a little bit more seriously. There's a well-known parapsychologist here in the UK, and I remember having a conversation with him, and I said, "What's it like being with academics in a very well-known university, dealing with the afterlife and the possibility of one, and looking at different avenues of how it all works?" And he goes, "Yeah, I do get not necessarily laughed at by my colleagues, but essentially he does get a bit of a sort of, oh, well, you know, it's not a serious subject to even look into." But as you've mentioned, there's so many different aspects of it. It's environmental science, it's psychology, it's all sorts of stuff. It's physics. It's not just one thing, and they're well-respected parts of science. So that would be great if that would happen. I think it's very, very gradually going that way, but it's going to be a long time yet.
You know, time is coming when I must say so long for tonight. But what is your final thoughts? What would your final words of wisdom be to members of the X-Zone Nation tonight who are so inspired by our conversation tonight that they are seriously considering becoming a paranormal investigator? What are your words of wisdom for them?
Well, firstly, I would suggest, if you can, depending on where you live, to attend paranormal events. And reason being is that you'll get to meet other like-minded people if this is something that you really want to look into. There's lots of online courses out there. There's plenty of them, but research the people that create them and conduct them so you know where you're getting your knowledge from as well. Again, if you are interested in this and inspired, I understand your passion as well. But again, there's also a lot of people that when you do start talking and networking with them in public locations and events, they'll start to help you in your journey a little bit. They'll say, okay, I've tried this, I've read this, I've attended this, and you'll get a bit of more of a idea of sort of leaning into it. And if you want to take it further by actually doing more public events and going into haunted locations, or if you're somebody who wants to do private and residential cases, and that's a whole different ballgame of serious. But I 100% suggest that people look at attending events first, and then they get to meet other people and get to have those conversations.
I've been talking to so many paranormal investigators these days who are saying that one of the biggest problems that they have is that there's no new equipment being developed, no new technology that is being used in the investigation of paranormal activity. And in the next 30 seconds, what is your answer to that?
I think people need to change it up a little bit. I think we need to strip it back and keep it simple and have things that monitor environment instead of trying to detect a ghost. That's pretty much it. It's let's find things that help with changes in the environment so we can understand, as opposed to trying to find out what a spirit is and trying to detect that. I think that's the avenue we should take.
Beth, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show tonight. I hope I have the pleasure of speaking to you in the future. You do a lot of great work, and you make a lot of great sense. So thank you very much for joining us tonight. And X-Zone Nation, if you'd like to find out more about Beth, visit her website, accessparanormal.com. Good night, Beth, and thanks for getting up so early.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
X-Zone Nation, that's it for tonight. I'll be back tomorrow night at 10 o'clock as once again we cross the time-space continuum to this place that I call the X-Zone. A place where people dare to believe and dare to be heard, Monday through Friday from 10 p.m. Eastern until midnight, here on your hometown radio, Classic 1220. So until tomorrow night, always remember to be kind to each other, hug your child, tell them that they're loved, and always remember to keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light. Good night, everyone.